Hey guys, LevelCap here, and today I want to talk about something interesting that happened on Friday that might give us some insight into the future of Battlefield, specifically Battlefield 5. What happened is that the German game retailer called World of Games posted a list of upcoming games, one of which was Battlefield 5, scheduled for release on October 26th. Now the release date for Battlefield 4 in North America was 2013, October 29th, so October 26th is a perfectly reasonable release date. So basically this information so far seems to be adding up. The one thing that threw people for a loop is that below the release date it said in German, and this translates to in English, multiplayer tactical shooter in World War I. Now the screenshot showing off this information was posted, and then later on the website they actually changed the information and now it just says multiplayer tactical shooter. The release date is still there though. Now as you can imagine, this sparked quite a bit of conversation, both about whether or not the source was legit, and then two, if the source was legit, are people excited about a World War I battlefield? Now one thing that's for certain is that game details like this have been leaked before, pretty much in the exact same manner. We've gotten information about upcoming games because retailers will post stuff on their website, they've made mistakes, they put too much information on the list, stuff like that. I mean, it's also possible that there was an employee just trolling people over there. It's possible that they got the wrong information. It's entirely possible that EA didn't even give out the correct information because they're so top secret about whatever the next upcoming project is that they're just trolling. I mean, I heard rumors that EA was trying to leak false information about their game to other companies to like throw them off the scent of what they're working on. I think there's a lot of like behind the scenes tactics that could be at work here. So as far as the source being a legitimate, reliable source, there's absolutely no way to say for certain. But it has sparked a lot of conversation, and I found it pretty interesting to see what people think about the idea of a World War I battlefield. One of the funnier responses I saw on Reddit was that somebody saying, hey, I hope it's a typo for World War II instead of World War I, and it totally could have been. All you had to do is forget one I. Now, of course, there's a lot of people saying, no way would it be World War I. If it's World War I, I'm never playing Battlefield again. But then there's also a lot of people that are saying, hey, if it is World War I, I'm sure EA would do a good job on it. It is hard to imagine a full-on Battlefield 5 game centered around World War I, just because what do you think of when you think World War I? I think trench warfare, mustard gas, gas mask, and tons of artillery. It doesn't honestly sound like the most fun setting for a video game. I mean, maybe for like an afternoon, but beyond that, it's like, how much do you want to invest in a trench warfare video game? But was World War I only trenches? Somebody brought up an interesting point. During the early stages of the war, when front lines were not yet formed, there was a lot more dynamic and interesting combat, so it wasn't necessarily just trench warfare. There had to be city clearing at points and invasions and stuff like that. And then towards the end of the war, like the last 100 days, there was a lot more movement because they developed new tactics during the war using tanks and infantry movement, fighter support, airplane support, and stuff like that. So basically the war got much more interesting towards the last days when lines were changing and people were pushing enemy lines more aggressively and more effectively. So if the game focused more on that aspect of the war rather than just the trench warfare, I could see how it could play out more like a traditional Battlefield game. Another thing that's interesting to note about modern Battlefield games is that even though they're sort of simulating these like armies that are supposed to look and feel real, we have a huge variety of weapons to pull from all over the world and from different time periods, just to give us a massive amount of variety. Now, although World War I, we think of people using bolt-action rifles and these giant clunky machine guns, if DICE decided to pull from all the weapons that were available throughout the entirety of World War I, you would actually have a huge lineup of weapons. I mean, there's literally hundreds, and not just like different versions of bolt-action rifles, but the Germans even had like prototype SMGs. There's lots of fully automatic rifles towards the end of the war that were handheld that you could use. There were combat shotguns being implemented. I mean, you can basically find just about as much variety from the amount of weapons available in World War I as there is in any sort of modern Battlefield game. It just depends on how much DICE is willing to sort of implement those guns in a large variety as opposed to just bolt-action rifles or semi-automatic rifles. Also, World War I has some of the most famously large aerial battles of all time, so if people are into flying airplanes, that could be a big aspect of the game. Tank warfare was definitely a big aspect towards the end of the war, and they had some pretty crazy looking World War I tanks. Naval warfare was a part of it as well. There was campaigns in a much larger part of the world too. I think there was some stuff going on in Africa as well. So you could have a good variety of scenery and potentially different types of action as well. I mean, I think most of the war really was trench warfare for the most part. But if they choose to focus lightly on trench warfare and largely on other areas, I could see World War I being a theater of war that DICE could create a Battlefield game around if they had to. Now, based on public opinion, I think Jack Frags did a poll on what kind of Battlefield game you would want to see, and World War I was one of the least popular theaters of war. It seems weird that DICE would pick something that so few people were enthusiastic about. But one thing that did become apparent when reading through the comments of this news article is that people would be pretty much upset no matter what type of game EA decided to make. If they made 2143, then people are going to be upset that it wasn't World War II. If they made World War II, they're going to be upset it wasn't Modern Warfare. If they make World War I, they're going to be upset for all of the reasons above. I mean, there's basically no way to appease everyone here, and as a game developer, if you are trying to stay fresh and do something new and innovative, World War I is certainly a theater of war that nobody has really explored very much. I mean, Verdun is a game that's done a cool aspect of trench warfare, focusing on the Battle of Verdun, and that is pretty much the only World War I shooter that I've played so far. Anyway, at the end of the day, there's absolutely no confirmation as to whether or not Battlefield 5 is going to be a World War I game. People are saying that wouldn't it be called something else and not Battlefield 5, which it makes a lot of sense. So unfortunately, the only thing we can draw from this is people's reactions, and that's something that I'd like to hear from you guys. If the next Battlefield game was a World War I game, would you shit a brick? Would it be something that you would want to play? Or what game are you really hoping that it will be, if not World War I? As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is LevelCap, signing up.